Thanks for coming to the Second Friday Art Talk. Group chat and questions will be held for the last 15 minutes of the show. All guests will remain muted until that time. So I want to go ahead and let's get things started by introducing our host, Victor Mavedzenge, and he will take over from here.
Thank you so much, and welcome one and all to 2021. We made it through, so yay! We across one barrier. Let's see if we can pull through together through this coming year. Tonight we host our first discussion for 2021, and I'm very proud to introduce to you our guest tonight, Howard Harawitz. Correct me if I butcher your name, Howard. But firstly, I'm Victor. I'm a Bay Area artist. I am also an art educator and a community member. Some call it a community activist, but I prefer community member. And so for those who are new to this panel, to this discussion forum, we hold a discussion every second Friday. And this came through when the pandemic hit and we transitioned to online activities. So without further ado, I would like to talk a little bit about our guest tonight, who is Howard. And Howard is a photographer, activist, musician, and programmer. And he has captured some of the most historical moments in our history. And it's fantastic to have him as a guest tonight, as we see our country in a lot of political turmoil. And so to be able to have a guest who has seen America change over time is such a wonderful a gift for us. And I'm looking forward to the chat we'll have tonight with Harold. What I would like to also mention is that we will have a discussion with all people attending tonight. So if you can post your questions in the chat, the forum will be muted for all except for the host and the panelists. So just post your questions in the chat and we'll attend to those. And also a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to catch up with all the past art talks, we have them on Friday Artwalk. FridayArtwalk.com, and you can see the previous talks, but also contact information for the artists that we have interviewed here and others who are still coming through to be on the show. Without further ado, I'd like to now welcome Howard, and we're going to get straight into it and ask you, Howard, tell us a bit about yourself. Where you're from, and why are you here tonight?
Oh well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Most of my early childhood was during World War II. In fact, I remember as a 4-year-old child, one of the first conversations I remember was listening to my mother talk to a friend of hers. I don't know what they said, but I remember asking the question. I said, "Mom, what's a war?" It was in December of 1941, which was the start of World War II. And I don't remember what she said, but that's the earliest conversation I can remember. And the neighborhoods I lived in when I was young, for the most part, were entirely Jewish. I don't think I met anybody that wasn't until I was in college. I do remember once on one street where I was living, there was a girl that came soon after the war in about late 1945, and she had a number tattooed on her arm. She was a 9-year-old girl.
Whoa. And
I remember that, and I remember, people trying to explain to me what it was, although I don't remember what she said. We lived in a house that had an apartment in the basement, and it had a kitchen, and my father turned that into a darkroom. He was an avid amateur photographer, as were a couple of my uncles. So photography was in my family, for as long as I can remember. In fact, I used to have a picture. I posted it on on the internet of myself holding one of these box cameras when I was about 4 years old. You might have seen it, but probably don't remember if you did. I can't find it now. Anyway, so I grew up in a house that was full of photography. My father, one of my uncles and one of my father's best friends were aerial photographers during World War II. And they would talk photography a lot when they came over. And I'm trying to think of, and oh yeah, my father had a dark room with an enlarger in the kitchen in this apartment downstairs in our house. And I used to love to watch him print pictures. In those days, you actually had liquid trays with chemicals in them, and he would project an image onto special photographic paper with an enlarger, and he'd put it in the developer, and you would see the image come up in the developer. And to me, that was magic. I loved it. And, you know, before I was 7 or 8 years old, I was doing it, and I was developing pictures and making prints for my neighbors before I was 10 years old. So yeah, I've been in photography for a long time. My father, the first camera he gave me was what's called a twin lens reflex. It's kind of a it's a biggish camera, and it uses these rolls of film that have paper around them and so on. I found it clumsy, but it was a good camera and I used it. And then when I was about 12, he got me, I remember, a Kodak Pony 135. It was 35 millimeter camera. I loved it because you could put film in it and take 20 or 36 pictures without changing film. And it was small and very easy to use. And I took pictures of my family and my friends, and somewhere those pictures may still be around someplace. And when I was in high school, a friend of mine and I, one of the things you had to do, it was awful, was you had to dissect a frog in biology.
Okay, before we go to the frog, I promise you we'll go back to the frog and find out what happened there. I would really like to jump in and ask you, what did you see in the photos that your father was developing? What was the feeling that they conjured up in you?
Actually, I barely remember that. I just remember the magic of the image. That my memory is entirely of the magic of the image coming up in the developer. That's what stays with me.
Beautiful. Sarah, could you pull up the image of Howard's photograph from the book? So we're going to take a look at your entry in the art book and just talk about that photograph, because I find it really interesting. The thing about living with a book is that, you know, you revisit these images over and over. And if we can keep it at the presenter view when we go back to the interview, that would be great. So, Howard, tell me a bit about this image.
Well, my wife Cheryl grew up in England, and we would visit there every year or two. There was a period when we visited fairly regularly, and although she didn't live in London, we liked the city, and we'd go there, and we'd use the subway to get around, and then they call it the Tube. This is actually a tubular walkway. And these were people just walking in front of us, and for some reason I thought it would make an interesting photograph at the time. You know, the geometry, it was the geometry of it that caught my eye, and you know, the perspective, the way that if you look at the top lines, they converge. And so I took the picture.
It's like a star.
When I look at it, it's interesting that you took the picture from the composition aspect of it, but when I look at it, it's just mind-blowing, because what I see, if on one side you see the selfish giant, and we've just been through 4 years of this presidency, that's really scary. But then again, if you take the number 4, you've got 4 people there. you know, almost like a reference to those 4 years tying into that selfish giant. And then when you look on the other side, it says a mask of innocence. How do you feel when you see that in your photograph that you took way before? It's almost like a premonition of the time we are in now.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't even notice it. I don't think I've ever paid much attention to that, to tell you the truth. You know, I certainly consciously didn't recognize it when I made the picture. What I saw was the sort of the round shape with the four figures going across it, and the convergence of the parallel of the, you know, of all the parallel lines.
Wow. Yeah, it just blew my mind, because the more I looked at it as I was preparing for this talk, the more these elements popped up. And I'm not usually one for over-analyzing images and trying to pull out a meaning from it. But here it's self-evident. I think people can agree that all those things are within that photograph. And it's just remarkable what you captured. And just that instinct to capture this moment at that time. Anything else you'd like to add about that?
No, not really. I mean, a lot of times I sort of see compositions when I look. Well, I worked in an art, when I was in college, I went to a college that was an engineering and art school in New York. At the time I went, it was free. It was tuition free. It was called the Cooper Union. And I was an engineering student, and they let engineering students work in the art school library because they thought they wouldn't know the art students and wouldn't let them get away with not paying fines and things. So I worked on Friday night in the art school library, and on Friday night, nobody came there. So I had a chance to, I just spent hours, 2 or 3 hours looking at art books and art history books for several years, actually. And I found that I actually learned quite a bit about art. I read books on composition. I read books about artists and so on. So I learned a lot about art history and art. And occasionally I'd go on field trips with the art students.
Awesome. So after our discussion tonight, what's your feeling about the photograph now, when you put it in relationship to the time we're living in America?
I still can't. Somehow I can't. It's interesting that you see it. I don't. I really don't.
Things pointing to so forth.
Yeah, I really just see the composition. I don't see any. What's the word I was going to say? Discursive content. You know.
Gotcha.
Or story. You know.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll end it off by saying this reminds me of Bob Dylan's interview in San Francisco when they asked him, so what's your role in politics and being, you know, the voice of a generation? And he said, no, I'm just a song and dance man. You know, it looks like the artist is the vehicle for these powerful moments that we see presented here. So anyway, I'll thank you so much for sharing that. I would like to move on to the movements you captured. You captured the free speech movement. You captured some really powerful images in Oakland also. So I would just like us to have a free discussion around what was it like during that time, you know, looking at life through a lens. For example, with this amazing photograph, could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. I had a good friend. He's passed away now. His name was Mark Comfort. And he was, he was kind of the founder of an organization called the Oakland Direct Action Committee. And we were very close friends. And I was also involved with an organization that my ex-wife and some other friends I knew, a guy named Roscoe Proctor. You may have heard of the Nebel Proctor Library in Oakland. He's the guy it was named after, and he actually was a communist. And he and my ex-wife and some other people formed a group called the Welfare Rights Organization. They formed it when the welfare department had fired one of the people, social workers working there, because they wanted him to go knock on people's doors late at night welfare recipients and see if there were any men in their apartments and if men's shoes. And if there were, he had to report them. He refused to do it and was fired. And somehow we read about that in the paper. And gradually a group got together and met with people who were, and we heard about people being kicked off welfare. And we met with some of them. And my ex-wife and a bunch of other people wound up they wanted to get the manual that the social workers used. And so and they wouldn't give it to them. And they had a sit-in at the welfare department in Oakland. It was the Alameda County Welfare Department, downtown Oakland. And I remember it because my kid brother, who was 16 at the time, was flying in from New York to stay with us to go to Berkeley High. My parents had been divorced and he was the youngest. And I had to explain to him where my wife was at the time. So we went immediately from the airport to the welfare department to see them picketing, to look through the window to see them sitting in. Wow. So, it was that kind of period. It was the 60s. It was, when all this civil rights stuff was going on. Demonstrations for employment in the North, demonstrations in sympathy with Black people in the South who were subject to all those racist laws down. I didn't even know that the South was like that there were actually signs that said whites only. I did not hear of that until I was, I was well into my 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for that. It's so interesting because your story is like this multifaceted diamond. There's just so many angles to it. Right now, I'm interested in knowing about the social welfare system during the time. I'm interested to know about your circle, or who you were engaged with. With the image we're looking at right now, why this one?
Okay, well, what happened was this friend of mine, whose name was Mark Comfort, as I say, he was one of the founders of the Black Panther Party. He actually brought the name up. He came from the South. I think it was Lowndes County, actually. And he brought that name from there. There's an article on him in Wikipedia. Although interestingly, because he and his family were associated with the Marxists and the Communist Party. He wasn't a member, but his family and people close to him were. And in fact, I recently saw a couple of movies about the Black Panther Party, and he's not shown in it and he's not mentioned. And I asked the filmmaker, one of them was our Congresswoman, Barbara Lee, showed one of them. And she didn't know, but somebody else said that it was politics. Wow. That's what they said. I didn't push for further details.
Gotcha. All right. Sarah, could we move on to the next image? And while we do, I would just like to read a beautiful comment from David in the chat. And he says, about the previous image, he says, not only 4 years of Trump, but the surrealistic vertigo sense of this time as we travel through the tube of the unknown. I'll just read that again. Not only 4 years of Trump, but the surrealistic vertigo sense of this time as we travel through the tube of the unknown. Wow. Yeah. Thank you, David. Wow. Wow, that is beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. All right, moving on.
Well, this is a part of West Oakland that the housing either it's been replaced with more modern housing, but I think most of it no longer exists. It was around 7th Street, and I forget the cross street, but they were clearing away houses in order to build BART, the BART tracks, the elevated BART tracks. And this friend of mine, Mark Comfort, and I, it was interesting. We'd walk around and knocked on doors and explained to people what we were trying to do was get more money for housing from the welfare department. And so we made a book of photographs of people and housing conditions in West Oakland and East Oakland, and actually made a book and brought the book to Sacramento to show it to some of the big deal politicians there naively thinking that they would do that. Oh, they don't know about this. If they knew about it, they would fix it. Of course, that wasn't the problem, and they never fixed it.
Wow. Okay, and now I'm completely blown away by your humility. When I looked at the image, what I was struck by was the Caravaggialism, you know, the dramatic lighting and, you know, the striking pose. But when you layer it with that story of housing and Bart being, you know, this development, just and seeding and settling people from their homes, it just has such weight to it. I just want to thank you again, Howard, for agreeing to do this, because this is such a beautiful look through our history in the Bay Area, you know. So if we can move to the next image, as you can see, I'm stuttering because I'm so excited right now. Okay, now this is very intimate. It's intimate, it's honest, it's take it away.
Well, Mark and I went through neighborhoods where we knew there was a lot of bad housing. Some of it you could see, most of it you could see from the outside. There were broken windows, big pieces of wood and supports hanging down, and so on. And we would knock on the door and explain that we were trying to get housing conditions improved and get more money. And in fact, somebody said, "Oh, you must be freedom riders," which I thought was interesting because it was a black man and a white man walking around together saying that we wanted to make things better. And so people were just, you know, we were just very honest with people. We said we were going to take the photos to see if we could do that. And they were more than cooperative. You know, they really appreciated that we were doing it.
Okay, so it's 1964. You're going around doing all this important work, and it doesn't actually yield the results you're looking for. But when you look back at it now, with all these documents that captured that very important period, how do you feel? Do you still feel the defeat you felt then, or have your feelings changed?
Well, there's more activity now in terms of, well, certainly in terms of civil rights and anti-discrimination. As far as actual fighting against poverty, I'm not convinced that there is as much happening positively in that direction now. And of course, we have the pandemic to deal with. So, you know, I'm sure that there's housing today that's every bit as bad as that.
And even that.
You know, and there are people living on the street, which we certainly did not. Well, there were a few people in welfare rights. We knew somebody who said, we asked him where he lived, and he said, "I sleep in the weeds."
Wow. Oh, okay. That really startles me because I work with the unhoused population in Berkeley with Downtown Streets team, and it's alarming. The numbers are alarming at the moment, especially with the pandemic layered over it. We're seeing people on the streets who shouldn't be on the streets.
Yeah.
So it's really stunning to hear you say you knew one person, you know, so the situation wasn't as dire as it is now, which leads me to my next question. How have things changed, if at all?
Well, I don't think that the authorities that run the cities would permit housing to look as bad on the outside now. Housing looks better on the outside, for sure, in most places. I've driven through these same neighborhoods. And a lot of it is in what's Emeryville and West Oakland. Much of that has been rebuilt. You know, they've torn down a lot of these houses. They did tear down the ones for Bart. And a lot of, you know, if you go down Mandela Parkway, you know, that's where these places were, in that area. Mandela Parkway didn't exist. I think that was a freeway, an overhead freeway at the time, the one that came down in the earthquake. so,
How
on
things
the
change.
exterior, things have changed. Things look better outside. Well, certainly in these parts of Oakland. I don't have occasion to go to East Oakland, where I hear there's a lot more issues. And so I don't know. I can't speak for that area at this point. I don't go there anymore. I just have no reason to.
Gotcha. Could we move on to the next image before we open it up for discussion?
Oh yeah, I was shocked when, as I said, this is West Oakland, in houses where welfare recipients lived, and this is the condition of an overwhelming number of them. Yeah, that's, what can I say? And I'm sure there are places, well, I don't know anymore. I can't say. I don't know what it's like now. I just don't.
Got you. Whew. Okay, Sarah, I think the images speak for themselves. If we can move to the next one.
I would add that, yeah, again, similar situation. And people were incredibly welcoming to us. And I don't think had I gone myself as a white man, I'm not sure, I would have gotten the response that Mark and I got together. Because there was a lot of that kind of political activity involving Black and white people together going on in the South. It was on TV, it was news. And it's interesting, one of the pictures I noticed that people had in their houses were Jack Kennedy and Martin Luther King. I wish I had photographed some of those photographs. I didn't.
Gotcha.
Because it was just something that was a lot of people had that.
It just reminds me of how images give us hope. What we see gives us that hope. There's a question from Jess asking, how did you meet Mark?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I was involved in the civil rights movement in fact, I moved to Berkeley because of the politics. I was living in Pittsburgh, going to the University of Pittsburgh, getting a master's degree to evade the draft. And let me see what happened. Oh yeah, so I was just involved in politics and civil rights, and so was he. And we met, and we had a lot of, I was also involved in leftist organizations. They were sort of Marxist, pro-communist kind of organizations. And, and so we knew some people in common, and we just became friends. In fact, my son spent time, when he moved away from the city, he moved up to Oregon years later, and my son wound up spending time up there with them.
Got you. Wow. Okay. I would just like to say to everybody on board, the audience, that the first image you saw is available in the art book that's for sale, and you could find it on FridayArtWalk.com or ArtPush.org. You can find the link to that. If you can't find the link, please do message FridayArtWalk.com, and you will get the link to that. But I must mention that the book is also running out. It was a limited print run, so if you want to get one, please do get that, because it has all these amazing images, and as you can see, it's a beautiful beautiful history lesson that we're going through. So Howie, is it okay if I call you Howie? Giving myself liberties.
Actually, that's what people called me for years. And when I first moved back here, I began to get in touch with them 40 years later on Facebook, they would still refer to me as Howie.
All right, fantastic. Well, I want to get a little personal here. I want to dig in a little bit. I am a Black man, and the politics in America has made me realize that even more, almost like magnified the fact that I'm Black. And so I would like to ask you the question. You've been in solidarity with African American people, Black people. How do you feel? How do you identify? What's your take on this idea of color that's dividing us so much?
Oh, well, I mean, there are so many levels of take. You know, I mean, obviously, you see people who have different. Well, it's interesting. Why do we do that? You know, why do we notice? We don't notice eye color. It's maybe not as prominent, but still, it's not something we notice. So, you know, I don't really understand that. I mean, it's something I notice. You know, period. And yeah, I don't know. I've just spent a lot of time with people of different races, especially Black people, because of the civil rights stuff and politics. In fact, I ran for city council once in Berkeley when a guy named Jerry Rubin, who was one of the Chicago Seven, ran for mayor, and Ron Dellums ran for city council, and he eventually became a congressman and so on. We were on the same slate. Happily, I lost. I would not have wanted to be a politician in any way, shape, or form. I only did it because people asked me to.
Well, Howard, Sarah, if we can go back to speaker view, that would be great. I would just like to open it up now, if people would like to engage in the conversation now. But before we do that, I would just like to thank you so much, Howard. And this will be the first of many, because I'll be hounding you for more interviews about your work, about your perspective. And thanks so much for answering that question about color so candidly. It's sad that we have to come to a place where we have to talk about this, you know, and what I've learned from your work is that you see human beings, you see a struggle and you want to make it better, you know, and you do the work. And I'm just so grateful to ArtPush, the organization ArtPush, and also FridayArtWalk.com, because without the book, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be talking about 1964 Oakland and housing and the issues that we're going through. So I would just like to say thank you for putting this book together, because as I said before, my premonition is that this is going to be historical. Now we in 1964. Previously, we were talking to a muralist who is in their early 30s, who weren't even born in 1964. So with that being said, I want to thank ArtPush. I want to thank FridayArtWalk.com. I want to thank you, Howard, for being so candid and open about it, about talking about these sensitive issues. And my personal takeaway is that let's do the work. You know, there's work to be done. Let's do it. With that being said, there are questions coming through. Did it feel uncomfortable stepping into private lives?
Oh, just for me?
Yes.
No, because we were very straightforward and honest with people about why we were there. I don't think neither they nor we were uncomfortable. Occasionally people would offer us something to eat. Oh. It was rare, but it did happen. It's when I ate stuff like collard greens and other weird things like that I'd never seen before.
I'm tripping out right now, because the sense of community that you're talking about, you know, just the welcoming, the common cause, the power of honesty, you know, there's so many lessons to be learned there. I'm going to pass this on to some students who want to go into activism. There are more questions. Do you think art makes a difference? Do your photos matter? I won't say who asked that question.
You know, I have no idea, but people keep asking me to do a book. And so they're obviously of interest to people. A lot of those are people that were there at the time, you know, during the 60s and part of the civil rights movement. But I don't know. I'm just really lazy, I guess. You know, I don't like doing a lot of stuff that I don't feel like doing. You know, I'm retired.
All right. Deidre says, thank you for talking about your work, Howard. I have to sign off early, but I'm in awe of the photography and the social justice work you have done. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Is it possible to unmute people now? And she also goes on to ask, have you thought about compiling your photos in a, in a purchasable book? So the book question comes up again.
Yes, I've thought about it.
Usually it helps to do something about the thought.
Yes, Howard, we would help.
ArtPush will help.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the devil's weed that's making me this way.
Okay, so what I'm seeing now is I like to look at the bigger picture, like what are we doing? What's the point in what we're doing? And what I'm seeing is that we've got I think over 20 interviews now with artists in the Bay Area, amazing archive coming up. And now we have this trove of history that Howard put together. And my feeling is that I would love to talk to ArtPush about how to make this happen as a next step towards it. And I'm putting it on record that I'll commit to that. I'll be happy to help with that, because this really moves me to see a true artist who says, I don't know why I took that picture. I don't see what you're saying. I did, I did what I did. So Howard, I love that about that. Terry says those photos are stunning. Please do a book. So inspiring.
Mhm.
All right.
Dave has a question.
I have a question. So Howard, always love listening to your stories and insight on this stuff. Always great. Since you're an old school photographer with the classic equipment, what do you think of the new age equipment, even from Polaroids up to iPhones, where you can just click and just survey everything as opposed to waiting for your magic to show up? Do you still go like the preference of the old, or are you like adapted to the new?
Well, photographs are made by the photographer, not the device that the photographer is using.
True.
So, that matters more to me than what the device is. I could care less. I mean, in fact, I have a very small camera. Well, it's in here. It's this big, and it cost about $1,000. It's really good. And I would just as soon have bought a telephone that I could slip in my pocket and take pictures, because the quality of the photographs is more than enough for the internet. And that's how most of my current photos are displayed. I mean, you don't need a whole lot of megapixels to, put something up on Facebook or even on a full screen.
Wow. Okay. So sorry, could I just jump in? You said it's not the device that makes the photograph, it's the photographer. Could you talk more about that?
Well, these days, most people, when they pull out a camera, they pull out a telephone. I know my wife does. I have friends in Nova Scotia that do, and I have friends here that, in fact, Jessica, is always putting pictures up with her phone. She's one that I happen to remember, but a lot of people do. So, I mean, there are people who get sort of snobby about it, and I'm certainly not one of them.
Wow.
Let me just interject. If you do have a question and you want to ask it verbally, just raise your hand and I will select the unmute button. Jess, you want?
I'm kidding.
Hold on.
There you go.
I just want to second Victor's request and offer my services for free to lay out your book, Howard. It would be like the biggest honor of my life if I could lay your photographs out in a book. So if you and Cheryl could work together on putting the photographs together or sending me a batch, I'll pick them, however you want to do it. I'd love to take it on as a project. That's all I want to say. I'm super excited about that idea, and I'm just going to stop it at that.
Awesome.
Another excellent ArtPush project.
Yeah, I think it could be an ArtPush project.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank Jessica for that offer. I've been looking for somebody that would be willing to deal with that. I think I have a whole bunch of photos already on one of these memory stick things. You know, I have them on, that's one thing that's horrible. People, I get requests from people who will pay me actual money, like sometimes hundreds of dollars, for a photograph that they saw somewhere and that they need a copy of, you know, in decent resolution and so on. And I can never find them.
Okay, it looks like there's work to be done here. I'm also committing to help out to the project. I've got a couple of ideas on how I would like to be engaged with that.
Oh, wow,
That's fantastic.
that's wonderful.
And I would also like to say to the community that we've had this time and time before where we're too shy to speak out about what we need. And here we have resources and people willing to help. There's no harm in asking. And I speak to myself here because I'm one of those people who never used to ask for anything. But now I'm one of the first to say, I need this. Hey, if people can't provide it, that's okay. But I feel we're selling ourselves short as a community by not putting out our needs. I think if we do it rationally and non-selfishly, we can move forward. There's so many resources in our community that we could benefit from. And so Howie, we're in the same boat. So let's get this project going and done.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right. Howie wants to add something else.
I just want to thank you for those offers. I mean, I've been looking for that, you know, not sort of, you know, sort of wishing for that, I guess, and not really expecting it for years. So, you know, let's definitely make contact in the near future about how to arrange it.
Awesome.
And thank you again.
Thank you. I would just like to do a little bit of housekeeping. So if you've got any questions, please get them ready. I would just like to say thank you once again to the two organizations that came through to make this happen. FridayArtWalk.com, run by Studio 23, and also ArtPush.org, which is a new organization that brought us this book, The 100 Bay Area Artists. The book is a limited run print. I'll mention that again. And it's available on artpush.org. It's a wonderful gift. I've had raving reviews from people who got it as a gift. With that being said, I would also like to say thank you to the people who've supported this art talk throughout the year of 2020. When we started it, it was just something to do during the pandemic, but it's turned out to be something monumental because when people start discovering what we're doing, what we did, it will be really a truly remarkable thing that came out of 2020. And thank you for making 2020 something positive to look back to, because we did this and we're moving forward with it. I think there's no stopping it now. So with that, I would like to say thank you to everybody who participated, to people who watch it in the future. This is what it's about. This is what a thriving community does. And with that being said, I would like to open it up for further questions. And David, thank you for that beautiful quote, that beautiful thing you wrote. That is, oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. I love that.
Can you send that to Howard, Victor?
Yes, let me copy that and send it to him.
Jeffrey, I see you have a question. Oh, you unmuted. Okay, good.
I realized I needed to go up and get my hearing aid. While I was doing that, I probably missed an important thing, which was how were you funded? I mean, were you just doing this on your own, or was someone paying you to take these pictures?
Well, interestingly, I'm funded. I wouldn't use that term. I mean, usually I was often I was working. I'd also been a student, but I could afford to go to graduate school and pay tuition. You know, I saved money. I never had an excess of money, but I managed to get what I needed somehow. I mean, when I wanted a camera that cost a couple of $1,000 or $2,000 back then, I would figure out how to get it. You know, and because I have an engineering degree, I can get these things. You know.
But he's asking if you paid for photos.
Yeah, but I could pay for them myself. You know, so and that's basically what I did.
Self-funded?
Yes, yes.
Wow. Sorry, I was just sending Howie the quote from David. David, I hope that's okay that I send your quote. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. All right. So that's it. That's an interesting part about it because thank you for asking that question, Jeffrey, because I was also wondering how did you, how were you making it through doing such important work? There's so much groundwork you had to cover, and also, the cost of producing the photographs. So it's interesting to see that you were fully invested in it.
Yes, I was, and a lot of times I would somehow get laid off from a job and get unemployment insurance, and so that gave me some income while, of course, I was looking for the appropriate work that I used to do. In fact, I once actually, I started out on unemployment, but I got paid by the California Farm Workers Health Department to go to the packing sheds all over California and fields and photograph, people working there and living conditions and so on. It was almost like some, one of these 1930s Farm Security Administration, which, by the way, a great bunch of photos. It felt like that. I actually could do that summer. It was good.
Oh, awesome. Anybody else with questions? Are we at 2018? 18 after 8.
I have a, oh wait, Yolanda, you go. Hold on.
Hey, Howard. I really value the insight, the cultural insight that your photos offer us. I feel like there's not just the visual interest, but also seeing inside of people's lives that really have a lot of value, and that I appreciate. I know when I first came to Oakland, I moved in with my cousin who lived on 8th and Cypress. That's where I grew up. I grew up in West Oakland. And she would tell me about stories of how they wanted to buy out her house so that they could build the BART station and develop that area. And that she was very, very proud of her home. It's an older Victorian, just a beautiful home that she really treated as her child, and she loved and adored, and even found more pride in when she held on to it and didn't sell it to BART. And I remember growing up with these stories, and I love the history of West Oakland, all the different stories around, all the people there. So thank you for sharing.
Wow. Go on, Howard.
Yolanda, if you grew up, there was a guy, he was a local character, and they called him the mayor of West Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in the street and he'd be just, greeting people. Curtis, something, I think. You remember him?
I do remember him. I don't remember a lot. I was young, but I definitely recognize that name.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, just a real character, that
yeah.
I still remember him.
I would also like to mention that we did an interview with Yolanda, and she talked about the photograph in the book, which also covered the Black Panther movement. And so it's interesting to see that we've got two artists right here, right now, Yolanda and Howard, who covered a similar subject, actually the same subject in a lot of ways. So it might be interesting to have you two as panelists at some point and just talk about, your perspectives and views as to, the civil rights movement and where we are now. And I love that we have this organic conversation happening from the photographs to Yolanda's history in West Oakland. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. It is 2021. We've got, no pun intended. We've got 9 minutes before we finish the show. Yeah. It looks like it's gone a little quiet, which is okay. Yes, Howard.
One thing I think that's different today than the 60s was the fact that we never get together face to face in big meetings where we together could discuss strategy, everybody in the room. We write leaflets like that. Of course, they were leaflets. And then at the end of these meetings, we'd usually, just sing. And there was music, very much part of the movement back then. Bob Dylan being the most notable example. But there were certainly others. Oh yeah, Little Boxes. That's right. Remember Little Boxes? You know that one? Malvina Reynolds was a Berkeley activist. And one night she invited a bunch of us to her house. I think it was in West Berkeley, in a basement. We went in the basement apartment to have a meeting, and she told us about this new song she had written. And she said, "I'll sing it for you now. I've never done it before." And it was Little Boxes on the hillside and so on. Yeah.
Wow, Harold.
It was a big hit, that was.
Yeah, it was. That was Berkeley, it was just one of those places at that time.
Okay, so I just want to make it, I just want to make sure that we are aware of what we might be doing here. Is it okay if people contact you to discuss with you your photographs, your life, because your contact information is in the book, they can reach you through your website. Are you open to that?
Sure, yeah. Fine.
Okay, fantastic, great. People, you can actually reach Howard through his website. The contact information is there. And so the beauty of this book, once again, it's got 100 living artists in the Bay Area who you can contact right away and start having a conversation about what matters to you where art is concerned. All right. So with that being said, I would just like to round it off by saying thank you to our host, Sarah and David, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for putting this together. Jess and Wes, thank you so much for all the work you did to make this happen. FridayArtWalk.com. Once again, your work in the community is much appreciated. ArtPush.org. Let's make 2021 your year and just push the arts forward. And to everybody who supported this endeavor, I'd like to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And may 2021 be our year. Remembering that what we focus on becomes our reality. So without being naive, we have to look on the bright side. We have to demand that this year be abundant, blissful, and healthy for all of us, because we are creators, and what we imagine we become. With that being said, have a pleasant night.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Howard. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hadn't said thank you because I'll be in touch, my friend.
Well, yeah, I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody for paying attention to this. Again, thanks, and have a good evening.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody. Do you want to open it up for the last 4 minutes so we have a one of those crazy Zoom moments?
Crazy.
Yeah. Jess, should I stop recording? And then we just open it up to chit chat?
Can you unmute us again? I accidentally.
However you want to do it.
Are we muted?
good. Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Why
Stop
not?
recording and people can
You
just
don't have to
talk
stop
freely.
recording. We can always edit it out.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
keep recording.
All right, I'll just leave it on and then let's see how I unmute, ask all to unmute. Okay, now I'm just gonna let everybody unmute themselves, but
Okay.
I did have a thing to bring up. I kind of was hesitant because I felt like it was kind of, the conversation was kind of positive, and so this felt a little dark to me, but it is interesting to me in that Howard, you mentioned earlier, you said, why do we do that? Why are people racist? Like, why do they care about skin color? We don't pay attention to eye color. Well, there's so many examples of people referencing that in ways like, for example, there was an episode of Black Mirror where this racist family wanted to travel to a location, a fictional location where everybody was white. And they did, and they got to this town and they thought it was going to be utopia. But the wife and her daughters and the baby all had black hair, and the husband had blonde hair. And in this utopia where everybody's skin was white, what they discriminate, well, actually, no, everybody's skin wasn't white, which they found out later. But so skin color didn't matter in this town. It was only hair color. So anybody that had black hair was discriminated against. And you had to have blonde hair or you were murdered or jailed or sent out of the excommunicated. So it was just showing that it's not that humans pick something. We pick something and we focus on that. And you can see that in tribal warfare, in, not even tribal, but community warfare in Africa and in other cultures where people have the same skin color and essentially the same hair color and eye color, but it's one difference or another. It could be religion, it could be, certain cultural beliefs, just could be something as simple as we live on the mountains and you live in the valley, therefore we hate you. And so it's always been a very interesting thing to me that humans have to pick up on some sort of difference. Like, what would we do if everybody was exactly the same? How would we
find another difference?
We would, you're right. We would find a way that somebody had a glitch or somebody had like a mole on their underarm. They'd have to be executed. It's just, I don't understand that. I don't understand why.
I have a mole on my underarm. What the hell?
I would just like to jump in there and say, we're blessed with intelligence. And unfortunately, the intellect is like a knife. So it cuts. That's what intellect does. It dissects. And unfortunately, if we don't use our intellect, then it turns against us. It becomes a vehicle for our own destruction in a sense. Because when we look at ourselves as one people, as human beings, it's ridiculous that we fight against each other when we are one, But and then if we look at it from an even bigger picture, we're part of this planet. We're all part of the earth. Shouldn't we be able to live together? Should coexist?
Yeah.
I was in Tanzania, and we went on this. I'm sad to say, but we went on a safari early in the morning, and we watched lions tracking a herd of zebras. And from a distance, you could see one of the zebras had these red marks on it. And obviously it was bleeding. And what we saw was that the lions were only targeting that one from the herd. And the rest of the herd separated from it. But what struck us was they didn't go and maul the rest of the herd just for the sake of it. They were out for a meal, they selected a meal, and they, it was natural law, but they didn't go out for the rest of the herd. When you look at us human beings, we've got more than we need, and we still want more, And
I think
Yeah.
I'd just say very quickly, I think part of what gives us problems is beside the intellect, we still have the lizard brain,
Right.
which is very basic automatic reaction: freeze, flight, fight, annihilate. Intellectual considerations tend to go out the window when people feel threatened or survival. And with all the propaganda, a lot of people have been, I think, duped into believing that their survival depends on us versus them. And whatever the them is, as all you folks have said, it's what little difference you can hone in on.
I agree. I think it's.
I mean, I think that's right. I think we are wired that way, from lizard on,
I think
so we need, but in addition to our intellect, we need the actual experience that goes with the intellect to kind of cut through that barrier, that instinct that is wired in. It's only going to change, I think, over we have to have a long view, and just, I just think we have to have a long view, and so we try to recognize that this is just literally a reaction from lizard days. This is not real.
Well, two things, Cheryl. I think most people don't have a long view. I mean, if I learned anything about that, I learned that in science conservation, because trying to get fishermen to understand that if you fish out your entire crop, you're going to make money right now to pay your rent, but then you're not going to have money to pay your rent or food or anything because you've fished out literally your entire resource. So trying to get people to understand that, look what you're doing right now, let's mitigate this so it doesn't impact you over time. That's really difficult. People see the short term, and they cannot, it's almost abstract for them to see like a long-term perspective.
But I think part of that is because I think part of
with that said, I've been watching the show, the chess show, of the girl that plays chess, and Queen's Gambit, and she sees moves ahead, like from all different perspectives, and happening way ahead of like most people. So I can't think like that.
Some people
work like that.
Some people can, and
but I can still. But the thing is that I can still, like what you were saying, like not everybody's like the lizard brain sees what's in front of them. How come? Okay, I'm not able to process a billion moves like that girl.
Oh, she cut out. Well,
I think Jeffrey wanted to say something.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay.
So I think that first of all, there's not a lizard brain and an intellect. There's obviously a long spectrum. And so you do have people on either like going through that, and some people who maybe, are in the middle, they can kind of see both sides. But I do think that what you do is you have people who are on the bad, like what I consider bad people on the intellectual end of the spectrum, use that to have power and control over people on the lower, I'm just going to use lizard brain end of the spectrum. And so then you have this control that is exactly what David said, the you versus me, and you are a threat to me because this person told me so. And that's all. They don't even think it through. They don't try to work it out, intellectually figure out why, just because this person has different eye color than me or different, why is that a threat to me? That's not a threat.
But you see, it's not just an intellectual thing. That's where it comes back to how desperate we need diversity. So we have the actual experience of cutting through those barriers, because I don't think, it doesn't matter how logical it is, if the instinct is still so strong because there hasn't been any real change at that level, then I don't think that by itself, I mean, yes, it helps to look at it, but I don't know that it changes a person's experience. That's why
No,
it's.
I don't think I'm understanding. Can you explain a little more?
You can explain to me and I can read a book all about my psychology and how I react to this and how I react to that. And the next time the fucking toothpaste won't open or something I'm going to do, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of, there's a disconnect between, you know, the experience and the knowledge, you know.
Oh, I would like to jump in there and just say, when we think about social media, I watched a documentary about these guys in tech and how they feel bad about what they've done because they tapped into our lizard brain, basically. They tapped into our gut reactions. They know that if we get a hit of dopamine, we'll be back there. So we're looking for that hit of dopamine on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, because the platforms have been engineered to trigger that, you know? So really, we know that. I know that. But like Cheryl is saying, the knowledge and the experience, there's a disconnect there.
Right.
Because the reaction is so powerful, so primitive, so subconscious, you know, that if somebody taps into it, it's hard for the intellectual brain to cut through that and say, wait a minute. Tomorrow I'm not going to be on Facebook. I'm not going to be on social media because I'm doing it too much. Suddenly, it's compulsive. I just want to pick up my phone and check to see what's the next thing. So anyway, this has been such an interesting discussion. I haven't had dinner yet. I'm going to say goodnight.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you so much, everyone. And have a happy, blessed, abundant 2021.
Amen.